Salamone, the podcast presents A Lover's Guide to the Never-Ending Apocalypse. Part 5. Don't hate the planet, hate the game. With guest Chad Parment. Welcome to Salamone. I'm Michael Salamone, now the Sala Show. This is part 5 of our series, A Lover's Guide to the Never-Ending Apocalypse, where we look at the rhythms behind the drums that beat for perpetual war. So far, we've discussed religious fundamentalism, corporate-controlled media, xenophobia and bigotry, and the dehumanization of women. This week, we examine all of these elements alongside poverty and climate change, and discuss American policy, where we're headed, and what it should be. Fanatical religious fundamentalism, radical intolerance and bigotry, using media and social media to recruit the imbalanced and extremists to a cult-like cause, belief that women in other cultures are less than human beings. This describes Islamic extremists in the Muslim Brotherhood, Daesh, and others, but it also describes radicals here in the homeland who subscribe to a right-wing, fundamentalist Christian ideology. Both of these radical bases have similar end goals: to bring about paradise on earth by bringing about end times, the apocalypse. Aided by rampant economic inequality, climate change making things like clean water a monetized natural resource, and a growing xenophobia throughout the world, citizens broadcast into a frenzy by the media until peoples worldwide are once again at war, all because two cults stirred the shit pot. That's not to say I'm against military and political action. Let me be clear. I believe terrorism must be stopped at home and abroad. Religious extremist fundamentalists must be put down. But policy and warfare won't do it alone. At the same time, we need a Citizens of Earth campaign promoting tolerance and global citizenry, caring for people, the poor and the hungry worldwide, bringing justice to the disenfranchised. These things are the only way to smother the next generation of intolerance as well. Because as Earth changes during this next generation, as oceans devour cities, as the landscape humanity has known for thousands of years becomes more challenging to survival, we need to be in this together. Not 99% against 0.1%, not one religion versus another. If we don't become committed to the survival of humanity and all its many intersections as equal and important right now, we're doomed to an eternity of tribal war. I'd prefer we take care of each other. But I tend to be an idealist. We need to talk to a rational intellectual with both policy and military experience this week. So let's go to that conversation. Our guest this episode is a returning champion, a really neat guy, an attorney, a retired military officer, a lifelong friend, Mr. Chad Parment. And Chad, thanks so much for making time to record another conversation with me.
Yeah, thanks very much, Michael. Great to be back.
What I think will be interesting about this talk is that my inclination is that you may be more inclined towards Western exceptionalism and I'm more inclined towards global social justice, but I know we both agree that violent fundamentalism must be stopped worldwide. So to kind of start us down this road, I've really only written down one but 3-part question to try and build a conversation from. It starts with, are we going to see another version of the Crusades? Are we headed into World War III? Are we going to give religious fundamentalists, both the murder cults of extreme Islam and right-wing Christian extremists of the West, the apocalypse they both crave? So we'll start there. Are we headed to another Crusades?
Well, I doubt it. I really would like to think that, despite some influences along those lines still remain in our society, I'd like to think that we've gotten past that. Of course we do, the inability to make fine distinctions is probably not particular to any era in history. There's probably something that we never get entirely past. But if are we really going to go back into that region of the world and try to wipe out all Muslims as heretics? Probably not. First of all, that probably just wouldn't be our inclination. We might consider, we might get to a point where we consider Islam in and of itself to be a very serious threat, and I think that would probably be a mistake. But I don't think we will go after Islam as such in an attempt to wipe it out. I hope that we've developed beyond that point at least.
With the Russian bombing and the talk of our alliance to NATO, there's been a lot of talk about what our responsibilities to NATO is, and if that would head us down the road to another world war. As a military mind, do you have any inclination to that?
When you add Russia into it, I guess that does start to make me very nervous. I guess the thing then is you're dealing with an older type of threat. I guess sort of a 20th century type of threat, for lack of a better way of framing it, maybe, and this new threat that I think is different. ISIS isn't an existential military threat to us in the way that the Soviet Union was, back in between the 50s and the 80s, when we really could have just ended civilization on the entire planet. ISIS will never really be that sort of threat. They're the kind of enemy they will push us to destroy ourselves from within. And Islamic jihadism or Islamic extremism up until now has been pretty good at doing that, right? Osama bin Laden's declared intent was in 9/11 was to provoke us into an overreaction that would destabilize the Middle East and allow Wahhabism the space to establish a new Muslim caliphate. And that worked out. I mean, he got shot in the face personally, but as a strategy, it seemed to have worked out pretty well for him. So they do seem to have a talent for baiting us into doing the things that they want us to do. And if what they want us to do is destroy ourselves by abandoning our own principles, there's good reason to believe they might be able to do that. Now, if you add that into a conflict with Russia, then the real problem becomes just escalating chaos that just becomes impossible to deal with, right? You can comprehend and handle a world where there's one or two of these problems at a time, but if you're trying to fight a conventional war with the Soviet Union, between the Soviet Union and NATO, and at the same time you're trying to contain a civilizational, ideological threat in the Middle East, that has all kinds of implications that you almost just can't even begin to explore or comprehend, right? I mean,
well, it definitely would be opening a Pandora's box of turmoil that is hard to even make a mental grasp of what could happen. You and I were very young men, but grew up in Chautauqua Institution during the Russian-Soviet talks of the 80s, which I was elementary school. You're only a little older than I am, but I know it filled me with great hope as a child being around that we were headed towards a new era of world peace, which maybe we were for a little tiny bit. But do you have any worldview of how the Soviet Union has changed from that spirit of glasnost to leadership under Putin and a more aggressive regime?
Well, I've never been an expert on Russia, or the Soviet Union, but this just seems to be something that is kind of inherent to their national character, and they just it sort of seems that they always they're engaged with Europe. They're right there. They understand or have some exposure to sort of these more Western values, but they just don't ever seem to have been able to go through the process that France went through or Germany went through. And maybe the forces of history just take longer to operate at the peripheries, and particularly in a country as large as Russia or the former Soviet Union, where probably part of what drove France and Germany to become the countries that they are today is just density of populations and their proximity to one another. And smaller spaces create greater friction. Where maybe a lot of those forces in the Soviet Union or former Soviet Union are able to dissipate, but they just don't seem ever able to get past kind of this czarist history and that approach of doing things. There doesn't seem to be any. Putin has great support within the Soviet Union, and it's nominally a democracy, although everybody is aware that those elections are pretty well fixed from the beginning. He still gets away with it because he's got really high popular support, and it just seems to be that the people in that country crave stability over freedom, which I think is from my rather privileged post here in late 20th century, early 21st century America, I think is a bad trade-off. But if I had been through the Stalin purges and the collapse of one empire due to a failed economic system and kind of the drunken shenanigans of Boris Yeltsin, maybe I would be relieved that a guy like Putin had come along. But I don't, it's a shame because they, like you said, it's not like they're an Asian culture or a Middle Eastern Arabic culture where they've just never been exposed to kind of the ideas of democracy and individual rights or anything else. Like, they're familiar with this stuff. They just seem to explicitly choose to reject it in favor of stability and the outward appearance of strength. I guess I would say that's my take on it. Again, not an expert, but that just seems to be what they always are about, don't you think?
Yeah, that's all very reasonable commentary. I'm not an expert by any means at all. I can only assume that rampant poverty is a big part of that choice towards stability, which I think is also a big part of why others sign up for extremism. And that brings up a point about fundamentalism that was part of that 3-point question. The end goal for Daesh is paradise, life after the apocalypse. And I've seen commentary as recently as yesterday from right-wing fundamentalist Christians in this country that is also their Middle East strategy, is that they want the Jews to maintain the Holy Land and bring about the second coming of Christ. Is religious fanaticism the big enemy here for average Americans?
Well, I think that it maybe not the big enemy, but yeah, definitely one of the big enemies. I mean, I think it distorts our politics. I think if you're trying to impose a fundamentalist biblical view through the laws of the United States or through the foreign policy of the United States, then you're not really being true to to what I think America should be about. I was kind of shocked to find out. I imagine you saw that the Republican candidates were in Iowa trying to draw the endorsement of FamilyMatters.org or something. And the article I saw basically pointed out that there's a couple of these groups that really assert that America should be governed by biblical law. including, like stoning people for adultery. And obviously, homosexuals would no longer be allowed to marry, everything else. And
and that makes us no different than our enemy.
Yeah, exactly right. And if you had said, well, there are these people out there that believe it, I guess I would have said, well, okay, there's people in America that believe all kinds of things. But, when I read the article, it wasn't just that there are groups that believe it. It was that Ted Cruz and Ben Carson, all these guys are in town trying to get their endorsement. So they are, how seriously do you take that, right? Is it one of those groups where you try to get the endorsement and then you distance yourself and you really recognize that maybe their ideas are a little bit nuts and you don't really want any part of it? You just want the boost up in Iowa? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I think that religious extremism on both sides definitely has a part to play. It undercuts our own values, what I think our own best values should be. And it just exacerbates the problem. Those two sides will continue to demonstrate to each other that there's no possible compromise between them. Now, I don't think that we have any, that there's any compromise with Daesh at all, but what I think that we could do is undercut their ideas by more fully embracing and understanding our own liberal democratic ideas and living them more fully. But if we speak to them from a place of, our own Christian or religious extremism, we're just you'll never convince them that we have a better solution, or you'll never convince anybody watching who maybe leans in their direction, right? Look at a country like Turkey. Turkey is, there's an argument made that they're the most strategically important country in the world today. And they've always sort of been this hinge country between Europe and the Middle East. And right now they're very clearly torn between Western liberal democratic values and Islamic fundamentalist values. Mm. And, I think the case that we should be making to them, the message that we should be sending them is that our liberal democratic values are superior. But they're just never going to hear that if it's couched in, or it comes as part of a Christian fundamentalist message as well. I just think it badly undercuts our own position and just exacerbates the problem and deepens the divide between the two parties. We need to be convincing people that our ideas are better. I think that's ultimately how we get past Daesh. You can't. I know it's very emotionally satisfying. And the week after Paris, there were so many. I'm sure you saw it. So many people who wanted to carpet bomb the Middle East and drop nuclear weapons and maintained that the problem was politically motivated rules of engagement imposed on our military forces when we were over there the previous time and everything else. And it's just, I always really wanted to respond, but I chose not to, because you're not going to convince those people, and they're not really responding intellectually or from a place of understanding. That's just an emotional response, and they want to kill them all. But I can guarantee you that the problem was not that the United States Marine Corps couldn't kill who it needed to kill, right? And if you go in and you carpet bomb, what are you going to carpet bomb in the middle of the desert out there? It just doesn't make any sense as a strategy, and if you look at history, early advocates of air power thought that air power was going to end ground combat entirely, because you could just pummel societies from the air and they would eventually surrender. What we learned during the London Blitz and what we learned by bombing Dresden and firebombing Tokyo and all these other places is that really you make the will to resist that much stronger in the populations that are under fire like that. So, kind of the kill 'em all overwhelming military response is just not the way that we're going to beat these guys. You got to beat them by demonstrating that we've got a better model for for modern life.
You brought up a bunch of great points there, but continuing down the line of strategy, and you mentioned the presidential candidates. The candidates in the U.S. here have policies ranging from tagging and registering all of the Muslims in America and closing their mosques. That's the GOP, of course. Carpet bombing the region, Hillary Clinton, to building a stronger military and political coalitions in the regions, Bernie Sanders. Do you have a handle on these policies? And I'm not asking for endorsement, but enough to tell me who has the best plan that they're putting forward?
Well, I mean, clearly the Republican plans are 180 degrees away from what I've been saying, what I've been advocating, which is that we need to better understand and more fully embrace our own values and live them with courage, right? And I was with the Syrian refugees, I think there's no better demonstration that open societies are superior and that they require superior courage than to let those folks in, right? I mean, that sends the right message. Responding out of fear, cracking down, becoming a more, tending more towards totalitarianism, by any degree, I think is moving in the wrong direction, and it's trading short-term security and probably just the feeling of short-term security for real long-term success. But I don't think we understand, we didn't, even when we were kids, we didn't take history classes in high school. We took, or maybe we did in high school, but I remember social studies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we maybe had a couple weeks of civics or something, but I don't really remember a whole lot of it. I mean, I think, what you and I know about American constitutional values and the founding ideals of this country, we were probably self-educated and came from our own. And I don't think that we teach that stuff at all anymore because it's controversial, and you can't get liberals and you can't get Democrats and Republicans on the school board to agree about how you want to approach certain questions in U.S. history. So we just throw up our hands and we don't teach it anymore. And people think that they understand what's in the Constitution, but they don't, and they don't know where, they don't know where they don't know the ideas that those values are based on, or the where those things in the Constitution came from, right? They don't know anything about Locke or Thomas Paine or Rousseau or any of these Enlightenment thinkers that really drove that. They think they do, but they don't. So I think what's required is is to go back to really teaching our own citizens those values, and then living them out loud. And so obviously tagging and monitoring mosques and not allowing people in, I don't think that's the right solution. I didn't catch where Hillary Clinton said carpet bomb people, but it doesn't surprise me, right? That would be the Clinton neocon approach. It would be the prototypical approach, right? Which I also think carries a lot of dangers to the country because you bomb them, right? You send Tomahawk missiles. And in that way, you can have an emotionally satisfying TV spot and it looks like you're doing something, but you haven't really asked anybody to contribute anything. And it doesn't cost the American people anything. So I think coalitions, right? I think that's got to be part of the solution because I think we have to be unified behind the values that we're trying to promote. And I just think we have to make better arguments for them. Both internally to the country, as citizens, we have to understand them better. And then as international partners with other countries that share those same values, I think we need to promote them. As long as it's a global counterinsurgency, right? Mm-hmm. And most things are, and we're generally pretty bad. We're generally pretty bad at it, right? We really liked World War II because, I mean, that's flippant to say, but that was an actual sort of war maneuver where there was, a nation state to defeat. They had an industrial plant that we could attack. They had troop formations that we could go after, and that's the model of war that we like. But if you look at our history, it's almost never, what we get. What you get is these insurgency type things where you have to be very judicious about who you attack, and you've got to combine military action with the right political approach. And I don't know, we just seem to hate doing it. We don't like subtlety, I don't think, or the American electorate doesn't, they don't buy into it. They love to stand up and say, kill them all, and pound their chest. And it just doesn't work that way, right? For every, I don't know what, for every 50 bombs you drop over there, one is going to go astray and hit a wedding or a school, or a mosque or something else. And it's going to...
We see that with the drone attacks.
Sure. And for every jihadi John that we take out with a drone attack, right. Like what's the ratio? Is it for every one that you take out, do you create five more, do you radicalize 5 more guys because you also killed, their brother? I don't know. It's hard to, it's a difficult, thing to say. And at the end of the day, you can't get some of these people, I think, have got to go. But you got to combine it with you got to be judicious about it, and you got to, now drone strikes are probably about as judicious as you can get. The problem is they're not really combined with any political message or efforts on the ground, right? It just comes out of imagine sitting there on the ground. It comes out of nowhere, right? And, blows your house down. And, and then there's no follow-up. It's like being attacked by aliens. Like, how would you ever relate to something like that if you're on the receiving end of it? How would you ever be convinced other than that, like, these people are out to get me and they, I could never be on their side.
Well, I believe not only for the type of terrorism we're discussing, but for domestic terrorism that we've definitely seen a rise again recently from, that there needs to be, much like you were just saying, a strategy of embracing our values of tolerance and leadership throughout the world of this kind of outlook of caring for humanity more than aligning with any ideology. But my fear is from seeing, maybe this is all because of like Trump and Carson, but seeing the intolerance in especially Americans, but this is true for some of my European friends as well, that fascism might be on the rise again worldwide. Do you have any feelings towards that?
I think that's definitely, that's probably the I guess if you said, what do I think is the biggest concern? Like, I think that's probably the biggest concern. And it has to do with all kinds of things. But the only solution I can think of is to go back and better understand better understand our liberal democratic values and really be scrupulous with ourselves and disciplined with ourselves about living them and following them. It's always been an open question about what holds America together as a country, right? Most nation states are founded on nations, and we only achieved peace in Europe after everybody got back on the right side of the line, right? All the Germans got back in Germany, all the French people got back in France, right? They all share a common ethnic background, and so it was always you can go back to the founders and the Federalist Papers and political theory at the time is like what holds together a country of immigrants that don't have a shared history, and hardly any history at all to speak of. And of course, the classic answer has always been that we're this nation that's founded on an idea. Well, if we forget what the idea is, then we're quite a bit hosed. People will gravitate towards a Trump or some sort of fascist solution that they think at least locks in security for themselves. I mean, if you look at who Trump's supporters are, it's sort of middle class white males who feel very disenfranchised, and they're not wrong, right? They are no longer the political center of gravity in the United States, and they're pissed. They were for 400 years being a white, relatively well-to-do by the terms of the day male, meant that you were the most important person in the United States, right? And now they're not, and they blame the wrong people for it, but they're not wrong in that they're being pushed out of the center. And so if they were, I think that if they had a strong commitment to, what I consider to be the shared values of our society, they would, they're maybe never going to be happy about it, but, I'm in that group. You're in that group. We seem to be okay with it. Like, I can live in an America that is dominated by, Hispanics, which is where we'll be, when we're old, right? I'm okay with that. As long as I live in an America that still believes, in the values upon which it was founded. And as long as that Hispanic community, by the time they become the dominant force in American politics, has really accepted that and really understood it and really embraced it. If they're able to carry on that tradition, I'm fine with that America, but if you don't have those values, then maybe not. And so I guess as things get more and more complicated, entropy increases, the population of the world grows, our society information flows faster and faster, and you get more and more of it. The thing I'm concerned about is more and more people get left behind, not just economically or politically, but they just feel left out of the process. Your tendency in that situation is going to be, I want security. If I'm not really represented in this country, then at least go after my enemies, I guess, or at least do what you can to promise me that I'm not going to continue to slip backwards. So I think that's, it's I guess a multifaceted problem, but I think that's probably our major concern over the next 50 to 100 years is how do you hold a country like this together? And then, in a broader sense, how do you keep the world from backsliding into more regressive, political arrangements when things are getting, more and more fractious, communities breaking down, information goes faster, people feel less and less connected, to one another. That's our big problem, I think, is maintaining connection in a society that is moving rapidly, away from connection, becoming less and less connected.
I've always felt that the most beautiful part of that American value system is the melting pot, as the fact that we are a people of many cultures that, when you talk about social justice and civil rights with folks, the hot button word right now is intersectionality of, a lesbian a black transvestite woman or things like this. There's so many subgenres of humanity within the United States. But to me, the beauty of our value system is that I keep saying the intersection of intersectionality, our shared values, our shared experiences as Americans, and that though there's always been struggle, and certainly from the 60s forward, there has been, it's a majority of Americans embrace the differences in the different cultures and look at that as a way that we grow as humanity here in this country. And those values I want to see at the forefront once again, and as you mentioned, lead worldwide with, because I think that spirit of American, not just tolerance, but embracing of multicultural influence is our biggest strength.
Yeah,
in my humble opinion.
I think that's probably right. There's I would recommend to you, and I guess to your listeners, a book called Cosmopolitanism by, and I might not say the name correctly, but it's Kwame Anthony Appiah, and I think he's a professor at Cornell, or he was at Cornell. I think he's at Columbia now. But it basically talks about, I think the idea is that that's kind of our only hope, is that we're able to embrace, I wouldn't say, I try to stay away from the term multiculturalism because I feel like it's associated with, I would say pluralism instead, or cosmopolitanism. Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to embrace that we have more, despite these differences, and we've got to be, I think, not just tolerant, but joyful in those differences. But we also need to, if it becomes all about the differences, and that's kind of what the middle class white guys resent, right? Like, they're like, man, now I got to share everything with the black lesbian and the transgendered Jewish guy, and everybody's, what they remember or feel like they remember was a cohesive society. And when people want to emphasize those particular aspects of their identity, it feels like an attack on that cohesive society. And it's generally not intended that way. And they maybe ought not view it that way. But I would just say I think there needs to be, at the same time that we try to embrace these differences and really, again, I think take joy in them, and learn to fully appreciate the benefits of diversity to our entire society. I think we need a renewed emphasis on sort of those classical liberal values too, and what binds us all together. Because if it all just becomes identity politics, then I think I'm never a big fan of identity politics anyway. But if that's all it becomes, then I guess I'm out. And you're welcome. You're welcome to it. I wish you luck, but I don't think that our politics should be about who I am as an individual. I think it should be about what we think as citizens.
I agree with all of that, though I can't help but think that the way we defeat these cults like Daesh or the extremists here in our own country is by really embracing the hell out of and celebrating our Muslim population here in the U.S., who are by a vast majority peaceful, charitable, wonderful people, our gay brothers and sisters, our transgender brothers and sisters, really celebrating these folks to show these fundamentalists on in all religions that they're wrong and they're losing.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, I guess. I mean, I think that would certainly be one of the most visible and effective, readily available values that we could demonstrate, I think, right? And I mean, there's free speech, we continue to have that. I wish that we paid a little more. The one that I think we need to pay more attention to, Michael, is participatory democracy, right? Like, we have people that just aren't, they claim to love America, but they're not really engaged in the process of running it. at all, and they're not, they want all the benefits, but they're not willing to make even the sacrifice of paying attention to what the hell's going on.
Yeah. Twice as many people shopped on Black Friday this year than voted in the midterm elections. Now, some of that's due to things like gerrymandering and voter suppression, which is definitely real, especially in the African American community. But as a whole, our populace has become apathetic and complacent, which is a big argument within the Democratic Party. Is what will voter turnout look like? Because Democrats really only win if there's good voter turnout.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Looking ahead, I really think like, I hate to make a prediction about about an election that's a year away and that we haven't even gotten to Iowa yet. But I just don't see I don't see a Republican that can win a national election, right? So, Hillary Clinton might not drive a lot of turnout. And yeah, it's typically true that you need high voter turnout. The Democrats need high voter turnout to win, but, even in 2012, right, where they went through that thing where it was like Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry and Rick Santorum all kind of got a week in the spotlight. Michelle Bachmann, like they all got a look, they got a bounce, like they were leading for a week or two. For one thing, you always sort of had Mitt Romney in the back. Mitt Romney always running like a solid second or third. He was always kind of there in the hunt. And those guys, they all got, like I said, like a 2-week look, and then it moved on. The situation this year is totally different, right? You've got Carson and Trump, just running away from everybody else, and no clear, viable establishment candidate in the background, right? And certainly not one that could, Jeb Bush would be the one that you would think like, all right, that guy can win a national election, but he's nowhere, in the nomination race, right? He's not in the position that Romney was in. So I don't know. Rubio, maybe. I haven't watched a lot of national polling, but yeah. So I think it's tough. I don't know. I don't see a Republican that can win.
I'm obsessed with national polling, so I can tell you that Hillary loses in a lot of matchups.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Bernie Sanders, though, crushes everyone. The only one who comes close to him is Rubio. But there are a lot of Republicans going for Sanders these days, too, because they aren't in tune with the Trump motive, which all the other candidates are adapting. A lot of the hardcore Republicans I talk to think it's going to end up being Ted Cruz, which is also pretty fringe. It'll definitely be interesting to see play out.
Yeah, absolutely. When you saw, I'm sure you saw, what is it, Western Illinois University, which has apparently correctly predicted the winner of the election, since 1975. They had their, I don't know how they do it, straw poll or mock election or whatever it was, and they had Bernie as the winner.
Yeah, I think it was a straw poll. I did see that, and I liked it because I like Bernie.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say I'm with you. I can't, you've probably seen some of my posts about Hillary Clinton. I just can't, I mean, where do you start? This wasn't really our topic. It was
that's a whole nother episode, and we've got a year to do it. So I invite you back for that one. But I agree. I think there are more problems with a Clinton presidency than good things that could happen for our country.
Yeah. Well, so I just think, if people got involved, even to the extent of paying attention to the issues. If they just started, but it's incredibly difficult, right? The mainstream media just doesn't really, give you the information that you need. I know that course, the right has had for a long time. They've made the argument that there's this left liberal bias in the media, and there's facts to back some of that up. But I think you and I think agree that the main bias in the media is just towards stupid and sensational. And,
or corporatism.
Yeah, or corporatism. So where do these people, if you're working a full-time job and trying to raise kids, like, the real objective, news sources that give you information you need are kind of hidden and hard to find. Like, what do you expect, right? Like, people aren't going to go and dig through the Intercept and Vice News, that kind of Vice News. I'm down on them, but they're not going to go and find like these independent sources. Even if they wanted to seek them out, like, how can you really even then you get down, like, and it's like, well, what's this person's bias? Where are they getting their facts? You start digging them down in the internet, you can find all kinds of crazy claims, right?
Sure.
So it's pretty hard to be an informed voter. I guess I sympathize, but
you have to try.
You got to give it a shot, I suppose. Yeah. Well, and that was really, the source of my frustration, and I think I posted last week, is I just think America's gotten to a point where American citizens in general just kind of want to write a check and be left alone, right? They want to pay me for national security, and they want to, they don't want to sacrifice anything in defense of our shared values. And I think that's a pretty huge problem.
Through digging through independent journalists is where I learned that the Pentagon cites climate change as a major factor in the rise of terrorism worldwide, and they named it the biggest threat to global stability. The UN's Poverty Initiative also blames global poverty for making people so susceptible to extremist groups' ideologies. What are your feelings about those two issues?
Well, I guess that's probably certainly true, but if going back to my previous point, if the solution is that average Americans have to sacrifice something in order to mitigate that problem, I'm not confident that they're going to want to do it, right? I think they would rather, I think what we'll end up doing, and this is kind of what I guess maybe not everybody else has read that Wired article that you sent, but, what it pointed to was that we will seek military solutions to these issues and essentially keep that instability away from our shores, and Americans will be satisfied with that, right? Even if you don't accept the theory of global warming and climate change, just resource scarcity is an issue, right? I mean, there's just no denying that we're using finite resources in an unsustainable manner, and even renewable resources in an unsustainable manner, and having impacts on the oceans that affect the livelihoods of people that live on the ocean, right? I mean, we're dumping plastic. Plastic gets washed off the coast of California and poisons fish in Indonesia. So I do accept the theory of climate change, but even it's not necessary to do that to say that our lifestyle is here as Americans is driving increased instability around the world. And it's not just us, of course, but if the solution is cut back on this American lifestyle, I am just not confident that people are going to want to do it, right? I mean, first, what you've got a big collective action problem, right? I might be willing to ride my bike to work, 4 days out of the week if I thought it would make a difference. But in order for it to make a difference, everybody else has to make the same decision too. And since I strongly suspect that they're not going to do it, then why inconvenience myself? In order to have, the infinitesimally fractional impact on global warming or resource use that my riding my bike to work would have. I'm speaking hypothetically. I'm a stay-at-home husband right now, but
well, I do consider you, at least in my circle, the closest I have access to of a military expert. And I keep hearing talking heads on the TV blame Bush and Cheney for Iraq. I hear them blame Hillary for her Syria and Libyan strategies as Secretary of State. Isn't there enough blame to go around?
I suppose there certainly is. All these people, I think you've come to this position, and I am too, sort of gradually coming to it, without indulging in conspiracy theories. I think essentially all these people are on the same team, right? Bush, Cheney,
yes.
Clinton, now.
It's no theory that the Bushes and Clintons consider themselves best friends.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah. Well, and isn't it charming to see Bill and George H.W. Bush, working together, going down to Haiti? Like how adorable, right? And really on a personal level, like I understand that Bubba is a pathologically like charismatic guy, and George H.W. Bush, I think probably sounds like a very charming man. So I'm sure that they can get along. But at the end of the day, yeah, I don't think they come from an old view of politics. I think that we really need to get past and abandon, and we need to embrace that we are all in this together, and that the power derives from the people, and get back to that, right? And they need to stop working for the major corporate interests, shaping opinion, using the mainstream media, which is a term I don't use in the Fox News sense of the word, but in the if you're a cable network, you're part of the mainstream media. If you're a major metropolitan newspaper, you're part of the mainstream media to a certain extent. So, they all use those tools to manipulate and shape public opinion, and they all, the policies are all driven by the concerns of, not special interests, but very particular, moneyed interests, so the Supreme Court has said that money is speech, right? We are all nominally equal citizens in this country, but if money is speech and wealth is divided in this country in the extreme way that it is, how do you avoid the conclusion that some people's speech just counts more than other people? They get to talk more than I do, right? Sheldon Adelson gets to say more than I get to say because he's got the money that he put behind it. That just seems, inequitable from a theory of democratic governance, right?
Yeah, it's a theme that comes up on just about every topic we talk about on this show, that there can be no real change without campaign finance change and really overturning Citizen United.
Well, there could, if the people get out more engaged, there could be, right? I mean, I agree with you. I think Bernie's got a strong chance of getting elected, and if he does, it'll be without massive corporate campaign donations, or the support of Wall Street or the support of ExxonMobil or Royal Dutch Shell or any of those interests, presumably. Unless he makes a radical, I don't know what would happen where he would all of a sudden start taking money from those guys. But I think he's got a realistic shot of actually winning. And if it does, it's because people got engaged and involved, right? So it can be overcome.
That's true. That's true. I've never seen political organizing like I see for Bernie Sanders. It's really inspiring to me to see the millennials and all they're doing. Here in Colorado, the National Bernie campaign came to observe this grassroots network that's built around him, because they're doing things that normally it takes a campaign office to manage in the state, and they've done it all on their own. It does take activism, and it is possible. He's doing better than Obama was against Clinton at this point. So, no, you're 100% right.
Yeah. So I think it's as long as this country continues to be structured the way that it is, then I think it's always possible. But it's always a long shot too. It's always a struggle, right? It's definitely structured against us. I think there's something significant though about this candidate coming along just about the time that you and I hit the point where I would say we are kind of the center of gravity of America. People our age are the center of gravity of American politics. And maybe that's not even demographically true, but this is kind of the guy that growing up in the Reagan and Bush years, you and me and all our hippie friends, like, this is the candidate that we sort of had hoped would. We would have always gravitated to. Yeah, this is the guy that we dreamed of, right? And then you sort of thought you were getting it with Clinton in 92, and that just didn't work out. And I thought we were getting it with Barack Obama, and that didn't. I'm extremely disappointed there. So I think this is sort of our dream candidate from when we were children. And it would be really interesting if it wound up being Ted Cruz against Bernie, because I'm sure you'll also remember, a certain type of just smarmy, stick it to you conservative who just, he kind of, he resented, people who were on the left in high school. Like, he probably wasn't one of the cool kids. He thought he was smarter than everybody else. He may have been smarter than everybody else, but like he just wasn't included in the thing, and he really got off on prodding liberal sensibilities and just being kind of a dick, right? And like, isn't that Ted Cruz? I mean, you've been reading some of the stuff about his personality, right? His college roommate hates him. And he said, look, 99% of the reason I hate Ted Cruz, he's like, I don't agree with his politics either, but 99% of the reason I hate him is just an asshole. If he changed all his political positions to agree with mine, I'd only hate him 1% less. He just seems like he just looks like that guy. I mean, it's so I think it would be interesting if it was kind of the embodiment of that smarmy 80s, the Reagan kid that like, how could you be 18 years old and be for Reagan? But there were some of them.
The bad guy in every John Hughes movie.
Yeah, right. So like, wouldn't it be great if it was, the liberal dream candidate versus that dude, and I gotta think he'd just get whooped, but, and maybe we'll see. I don't know. It would be exciting. If nothing else, it would mean that we got to watch the collapse of sort of the Clinton Democratic establishment wing of the Democratic Party, and hopefully we're able to usher in a new day in that regard. Anyway, so.
That's my hope, is that we can use this as momentum to take back the Democratic Party from the lobbyist influence that the Clintons brought in. But to wrap up, maybe this will be fun. The president calls. He says, Chad, I need you to lead a global initiative on crushing intolerance and violence surrounding that intolerance worldwide.
Mm.
What do you say?
I guess I would probably suggest that he calls somebody else. I don't know how much what. I guess I would say, Mr. President, let's start at home. Let's start in our own schools, and let's re-educate America about what America is all about. Let's get without engaging in intolerance. Let's get serious about a certain degree of assimilation, and ensuring that, that immigrants to this country, are welcomed with open arms, but also, that we try to teach them why they're being welcomed with open arms and what we consider to be the value of an open, progressive, pluralistic society, why we think it's important on Earth, why this country, I think, was rightly called the last best hope of Earth. So I would say let's start there. But what a fight that is in and of itself, right?
Sure.
So since he's not going to call, I think maybe the best that you and I can do is continue to have conversations like this, and hope that people listen on the podcast and continue to post things on Facebook. I don't know, dude. I caught a lot of flack over the last couple of weeks from people who seemed to be really bothered that Facebook wasn't full of enough cat videos anymore, right? And they were pissed that people were trying to use it as an actual platform for discussion and exchange of ideas. And that right there says something pretty discouraging about America. So I think I would tell them that we've got to get back to open and honest discussion and real education about the things that we care about, believing in our own values and living them out loud.
Well, I, for one, will scroll past your cat video or pictures of teaching your kid how to snowboard, but always stop and read advocacy, even if I don't agree with folks on the issues. Chad, I can't thank you enough for making time to speak with me once again. Always a pleasure, good sir. We'll wrap up this series that we call The Lover's Guide to the Never-Ending Apocalypse next week, but until then, I'm Michael Salamone, reminding you to please be good to each other. Cheers. Salamone is a podcast, taped live for a streaming internet audience. Find episodes and archives on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all of the places you get podcasts these days, and of course at michaelsalamone.com. I really think you should subscribe.